more tweets of the week here from Nebrasketball.
Yeah, so let's start off with it wasn't a surprise that Bryce McGowan's did officially put himself into the NBA draft. And here's a tweet from Donovan Williams, Lincoln kid that went down to Oklahoma State, but is in the transfer portal himself. We'll see what happens there. But he said, "Go be great, Bryce McGowan's." And then speaking of transfer portal and Lincoln kids, Sam Greisel, he was at North Dakota State for the last 4 years. He tweeted out, "Dreams to reality. There's no place like home. Let's rock Husker Nation." Committed. So he is back in Lincoln for next year. Also today, we learned that Eduardo Andre has put himself into the transfer portal, Dave. So we're starting to kind of get a little bit of an idea of what the roster is immediately looking like. And we also are getting a little bit of an idea of the coaching staff. Doc Sadler and Matt Abdelmassih are both have been both let go from the staff as Hoiberg starts to do his restructuring.
Yeah, it's a huge shift, right? I mean, Hoiberg hasn't coached in college ever without Matt Abdelmassih on his bench. He has been essentially his recruiter, player personnel guy this whole time, and the entire roster has been built with his connections with AAU and high school coaches, etc. And so, I mean, it's going to be really intriguing to see how Fred rebuilds this. The newspaper articles talk about how he's going to try to save the class with Blaze Chiata and Romeo Lloyd Jr. and others. And it could be really tough. Those are all Abdelmassih guys. It's not impossible, I guess, but I wouldn't say it's likely. I think they all have other options. But I mean, maybe Fred has had a better, connection with him over the last month or two, and maybe it's still the right spot for him. It's going to be really intriguing. It'll be intriguing to see who he brings in onto his coaching staff. It's also intriguing that who's stayed, right? Because Gates is still here. Is that right?
We haven't heard any movement from Gates.
That was the most obvious one, I would feel like, but maybe not. I don't know. It's intriguing.
Well, his brother, I think, he coaches at Missouri, if I remember right. And there was some thought that he might make the move to go coach with his brother. I think it's at Missouri. I could be wrong.
I don't know if it's Missouri, but I think that's the right storyline. His brother was going to be a Power 5 head coach. And it was like, yeah, it makes sense. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. And then what players end up coming back, we've talked about Walker. We think, good chance that he's going to come back. Does Trey, we didn't think Bryce would, but would Trey be able to come back? I mean, that's, and then Wilcher's, an important piece of this. And I'm sure that he's probably going to be back next year. So and then getting guys like, is it Breidenbach, the freshman, getting him healthy and getting him back, so there is a bit of a core of a team that we can bring back, which is important. We just can't keep completely flipping an entire roster over from scratch every single year and think that we're going to have any kind of success. But Boomer, anything on basketball from the from the stands?
No, nothing yet. No, everyone was just kind of still talking NIL, but yeah. So it was a rapid shift. They'll catch on it. So yeah.
I'm sure.
I didn't even know Nebraska had a center on their team. So.
Well, we don't play like we have one. It's a 5-out system, Rob. As
Walker,
you know.
Walker was the closest thing to a center I thought we had on there. So,
yeah, that's right.
Well, we're not going to be, talking a lot more Nebrasketball probably in the next few shows. So this is kind of closes out the season a little bit, and
mercifully,
yeah. And then, but I mean, the next thing is within the next week or so, I'm sure we're going to start hearing new coaches being hired. And transfer portal wise, do we have any like timelines? Like when do we think we're going to have a more finalized roster in place? I mean, is that something that can go deep into the summer or, in the next couple of weeks?
It can go pretty deep. I don't know the exact schedule, but it's very different than football where you have just a few signing periods. It's much more wide open. And so, yeah, I don't have a good answer on that one. I think it's pretty fluid though.
All right. So whoever we end up hiring, I'm sure they're also going to have some players, just like Abdelmassih would. I'm sure the new coaches that would come in would also have some connections and be bringing in some of their own guys. And
that
might be
the concern there, obviously, with any coach you bring in is, they're going to come in for that coach. you're going to have to trust, there's got to be a trust factor between Fred and the new coach, that fit is going to work, all those things. I mean, there's a lot of work to get done to put together a roster that we think could be even remotely competitive in the Big Ten next year. I mean, they had 9 teams in the tournament this year, as we know.
Well, that we're going to get to that in a second. How important, though, Dave, do you think it is to get a coach, like at least one assistant coach? I guess Gates came from Northwestern. He was there for like a season or so, if I remember right. But how important is it that we get one of these assistants that would have Big Ten experience?
It's a good question. I mean, on the surface, you'd say that sure wouldn't hurt to understand what it's going to take to win in this league. I mean, he did have something like Doug Sadler, who did coach in the league. I mean, it wasn't extensive, but I mean, 1 year is enough to figure out what you have to do to win the Big Ten. And Gates was already there too. So it's still a little surprising that they haven't been able to put that together. But I would say that's probably a clear advantage for any assistant coach candidate.
Hey, Boomer, there's another question from Ken McCone on there about will Fred focus on not letting the best players in Nebraska get away, or will he keep recruiting hired guns who can't shoot worth a blank? And Dave, actually, I think you'll have the best answer for this, because this is one of the things that we've talked about 100 times. But I mean, he brings in these guys and they can all shoot. I mean, if they're transfers, things like that, he's bringing them in because they can shoot. That's his MO, right? Like being able to hit those outside shots. And then what happens when they get to Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean, statistically speaking, they should be good shooters. They were shot well wherever they were at, whether that was in high school, a JUCO, or some other Division I program, and then they or another country, and then they come here and they can't hit the broadside of a barn. So I don't know why that is, but
do we need
think
better backdrops, maybe, like in the arena? Like, is it the shooter's eye? Something's off with that, because there's some arenas like Steph Curry, right? He has problems in Madison Square Garden every year, like, and sometimes
he had problems everywhere else too.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's the point.
Or you get Teddy Buckets, who is making everything, at the JUCO level, comes to Nebraska, can't hit anything, and then goes to New Mexico State and takes him to the second round.
Well, he couldn't hit anything the other night, so that's his thing. Is he's either on or he's
he hit 37, and then he goes cold, right? And he had the last game he played in Nebraska, he had what 39 or something?
40, I thought maybe.
I thought it was like 42 or 43 or something.
It was one point short of the record. Is that right?
Yeah.
Was it Bykowski that still had the record? But I think that Ken's point is about Nebraska players getting away. I mean, we got to start winning. I mean,
yeah.
And I mean, it's a chicken egg thing there a little bit, right? But I mean, Chucky Hepburn gets recruited to Wisconsin, and he goes off and plays in a top 10 team that's a highly seeded conference, Big Ten team that wins a share of the conference. Isaac Trout is getting recruited by a national championship coach. I mean, you just got to start winning, and then you're going to have better luck at getting those guys. You'd like to think that they want to play at home at Nebraska, but I mean, they don't. I mean,
Well, there has to be, you have to show them something on the court too. And it's not just NIL, there has to be more than just that to attract these kids. Salas going to Gonzaga. You have obviously Creighton's gotten a couple kids now, in the last few years too. But I think getting Sam Greisel back, it's interesting that's, the first domino to fall with the roster for next year. And that's a Lincoln East kid coming back from North Dakota State, where he was, an all Summit League level player. And then Donovan Williams, I'm just curious. I don't know. Maybe I'm making something out of nothing, but he was committed to Tim Miles and then decommitted when basically Teddy Allen committed. So it felt like a swap 1-for-1. And Donovan Williams ended up going down to Oklahoma State and playing there for 2 years. And now he's in the portal too. Maybe we can get him back.
Yeah, I take him.
We talked about Big Ten play and what it was going to take to have success in the Big Ten, but we also had a few more tweets in the week that are specific to Big Ten in the NCAA. And we are sometimes, I think Boomer and I running the account, we troll some of the other schools just because our teams haven't been very good. I get it. But the Big Ten, man, I mean, we get 9 teams in this year, and last year, whatever it was, 8 or 9. and we can barely get teams into the second week. And so we were struggling as a conference. And here's Mike Farrell. If Purdue doesn't win the Big Ten, should lose all berths next year. The conference has been awful. Inside the Hall, which I think is a Indiana show, Kevin Warren needs to get to figuring out why the Big Ten keeps underachieving in March. Today has been a complete disaster for the league. And then Dennis Schutte with the Saturday Traditions, he said Big Ten regular season versus Big Ten in the March Madness. And there's some cartoons that I don't understand.
That's from Space Jam.
That's from Space
There
Jam.
you go.
Honestly,
All righty.
yeah.
Very good.
And it's
I
not a
thought it was
Police
like-
Academy movie, so you haven't seen it. That's okay.
I thought maybe it was Star Wars or something. I'm
Close
terrible
enough.
with that stuff. You know that. Dave, I came down to Denver last weekend. We hung out, had a great time.
Yeah.
We watched a lot of basketball. Rob,
And with Rob.
Rob was with us too. I'm not neglecting you, Rob. We had a great weekend. Watched a lot of basketball. To all those points there, the Big Ten's had a rough go at it, and I don't know why. I mean, look, I control them, but obviously Nebraska's not in it. Why? What is going on? Why? Is it just the reffing? You hear a lot about that, but is it?
Sure. I mean, like, it's interesting. I can't remember who had this series of tweets. Maybe you guys saw this as well, that they were kind of dissecting the Big Ten tournament, and you know, it is the last tournament essentially before Selection Sunday, and maybe they should change that because like, you know, maybe the some of the best teams are too tired because they played late on Saturday and then Sunday, and they have to turn around and play again on Thursday or something like that. I don't know. But the data was saying, well, actually, I mean, like, a fair amount of the Big Ten tournament champions have done fine in the tournament over the last several decades. So they didn't seem to have any statistical data backing up that theory that we should end the tourney earlier. I do think there's probably a lot more evidence to the fact that, I mean, like, the Big Ten promotes a different brand of basketball within the conference, and the refs allow a lot more physical play to occur in conference games. That directly impacts someone like Fred Hoiberg, who likes freedom of movement in his offensive system. And it doesn't play well to his goals of scoring a lot of points. And ultimately, sometimes that can work in regular season play, but then once you get to the NCAA tournament, NCAA refs are tighter on that, and ultimately the Big Ten teams are at disadvantage, right? Because there is more freedom of movement, there's more calls on Big Ten teams, and that impacts their performance. I mean, like, you know, I would say this year, I mean, a lot of this is being made out of no one thought we were going to get 9 teams in this year. Last year, everybody thought Big Ten basketball was really good. There were some really high seeded teams, and they're expected to have a great tournament. We got 9 in this year, but keep in mind that included Rutgers,
Indiana.
and Indiana's play-ins, right? So literally they are on the cusp. You take those 2 out, we're down to 7. It's a very different.
That's still a large number. That's still
a large number, but we also have 14 teams that all play competitive basketball here, and are trying to win. So I mean, the play-in thing tilts that a little bit. You know, I think the numbers wise.
I agree with you too, Dave. Actually, on that as well as far as the style of play goes, because it's a lot of, you know, bang them under the basket type of play. Like, that's why we talked about, like, you know, Walker. You know, I'm a big fan of Walker because I like the way he plays under the basket. It's a Big Ten style of basketball, and you know, a lot of these teams that they were losing to were able to just get out and break. I mean, the big joke during the Wisconsin game this week, right? Like, take the under, because I think the over on that was like 135, right? Which is 135.
It barely got to 100,
and it barely got to 100. They even said it like in the first 5 minutes of the game. They said, "Well, folks, if you took the under on this, you might as well go cash that check now." And I mean, then it became a joke. Like, by the time the second half started, first team to 40 is going to win, and sure enough, first team to 40 did win. Yeah. You know, Wisconsin lost that game, but it's just such a slow. I mean, you almost feel like they're trying to play kind of like the Hoosier style of basketball, where no shot clock anymore. You know what I mean? It's just so slow. Pass. Take the you know, take the shot from inside the arc or whatever. I don't know. It just feels like such a slow down pace of play. And all you need is one team that's in better shape and can run the ball faster and, you know, outscore them by 10, 15 points in that because it's not Big Ten basketball. And you saw it a lot. I mean, what do they have left now? 2 teams? Is it
2 teams?
Purdue and Michigan, right? And Michigan was a team where nobody even thought they belonged. And here they are.
Yeah, preseason, they were expected more.
Well, preseason they were, and then they lost to Arizona. But sorry, I had to throw that in there. But yeah, I mean, preseason they were ranked, and then they fell off the map, and then a lot of people thought they shouldn't even made it after the Howard incident, right? So then, it's just, I don't know. It's the Big Ten's a huge enigma in the tournament every year, and give them 4 top teams and leave it at that every year from now on. Because
Dave, you're a North Carolina fan. You're happy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it got a little bit sketchy there. You left it about halftime, I believe, and you're like, oh, Carolina's got this. Carolina was up on Baylor at halftime around 14, 15 points. They actually extended that lead to 25, I believe. And Brady Manick, who was an OU transfer and it was just hitting everything, gets kicked out of the game with a questionable flagrant 2. Is definitely a flagrant 1. I feel the flagrant 2 was a little bit too.
That was a ridiculous. That was a ridiculous.
And they changed the game. Ended up going into overtime, but Baylor expended so much energy to get back in that game, outscoring Carolina, I think 38-13 in the last 10 minutes that they lost in overtime. So I'll take the Sweet 16, and that bracket's wide open. I don't know if you've looked at your brackets at all, but I mean, both Baylor and Kentucky are out of that. So it's Carolina, it's UCLA, it's Purdue, and St. Peter's. So, I mean, back to Big Ten, right? Because I know we're not a Carolina basketball podcast. I mean, we are all just saying, oh, it's a disaster for the Big Ten. But, I mean, Purdue should be the favorite to make the Final Four out of that, right? So, I mean, does that change the perspective if somehow Purdue and Michigan make the Final Four and you have 2 of the last 4? Sure, right? So the tournament still got a ways to go.
The SEC's struggled up to this point too. We're not the only conference.
Yeah.
And I guess when you have more teams in, you're gonna have more teams out. I will say that I legitimately thought Iowa was going to go deep. I don't know that I thought they'd win it all, even though I had them winning my entire bracket.
You lost a significant free bet on Iowa.
I did. Free bet that I could have done.
By the way, we were watching that game in an Iowa bar. All right.
Yeah.
That was probably the most satisfied I've been watching sports since 2020. I think that was probably, and I was really good. I didn't say a thing in the bar, man. I just had a big smile on my face watching that. It was such a beauty.
Yeah. Dave was getting me onto all the sports apps, the betting apps out there while I was in Colorado, and it was a ton of fun. And yeah, you get all these free bets and these, they're trying to build one of them. They give you $50 and you automatically get 50 extra. So I had to pay 50 and I got an extra 50 and then I just cashed out. So I walked home with 100 from that. And I was like, that was easy, but I don't think that was their intention. But anyways, one of them was pick any game, and I picked Iowa just to win. And if they win the first game, then I would get $200 of free bets. And it was like the next game. I didn't want to wait for some.
It was like, are you sure you want to take Iowa hockey? And he's like, yeah.
I was like, come on, it's Richmond, whatever.
They've got this. Right?
Well, Honky, what was your quote after that game? Losing $50 was totally worth it. You looked at me and you said that, but you kind of kept your voice down because, again, we're sitting in Sports Column, which if people don't know, Sports Column is a bar in Denver. It's a sports bar in Denver that's an Iowa bar, but they also have one in like right next to the Iowa campus.
In Iowa City, yeah.
Oh, it's in Iowa. Oh, is that why? Is that what that is? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they have a bar in Iowa City, and then they have the bar in Denver because Denver has a huge Iowa contingency here too.
Mm-hmm. So Redcasters, this is something we've talked about this in the past, but during football season, and Dave, I'm planning to do it again next year or this upcoming season. It's one of the most unique settings in the country is Lodo area of Denver, that downtown area where I don't know. I've heard like Manhattan and maybe like Wrigleyville are similar to where you have a lot of transplants all in one spot. And so you have all of these viewing sites of like every team. Like we could literally go from bar to bar to bar. There's the Wisconsin bar right next to the Iowa one.
Right next to it.
And they're all so well themed. So, you go to a Nebraska bar and they're handing out runzas, but we've been to the swamp in the Rockies and the Gators are doing that. And you go and we've had cheese curds and we've done jump around. It's one of the neatest settings. And I try to do it every year and we'll always do it. I mean, it feels like you're tailgating in each town of each school. And, 15, 16 bars later at the end of the day. It's you feel like you do after a good tailgate, but it's always a lot of fun.
That's how Dave introduced me too. Like when I started going and watching Nebraska games at actually the Giggling Grizzly down in Denver, right? Like we used to go watch those on Saturdays with you and your wife Katie and myself, and then after the game, like one of the traditions was Dave would find like whoever we played in the Big Ten, or I think even the Big 12, they were still in the Big 12 when we first started. Dave would say, okay, let's go over to this bar and talk with the fans and just, tell them great job, whatever, win or lose. Like it was, and that was like, it was like this respect thing. And the funny thing is this bar that we'd watched, it was a Nebraska bar, but it was also a Michigan State bar. So sometimes you'd be getting like go Big Reds on one side of the bar and go white, go green on the other side of the bar. And it's not that big of a bar, but it was always a friendly environment. And that's the cool thing about Denver 99% of the time is that's just how it is. You can go and after the game, you can go shake hands with fans of the other team and all that. So, and that was fun to do on last Thursday too. So it was one of the slower St. Patrick's days, but I had a great time hanging out with you guys. That was fun.
Well,
thanks, Rob.